Okay, so welcome everyone to this Kiss the Ground webinar. I'm so glad so many of you are joining us today. We have over 400 people actually watching right now. And so I'm just going to start with some introductions. For those of you who don't know who I am Farmer Rishi, and I am an urban farmer here in Los Angeles, California. And I've been just working in this field of farming and gardening for the last 10 years. And I am also the teacher for Kiss the Ground's regenerative gardening class. We have a course that we're putting together right now for this quarantine period that is going to be up very soon. So if you're interested in that, please join the waitlist at kisstheground.com. And I'll be happy to talk more about that at the end of the webinar once Vandana has gone to bed. It's very late for her in India. Yeah, of course, I want to introduce Dr. Vandana Shiva, someone I've known for the past 10 years. She has been one of the most influential people in my farming career. I actually spent 9 months on her farm in 2010, 2011-ish, and it was one of the most enriching experiences of my life, and has really guided the direction of my work and my career for since that time. Dr. Shiva has authored over 20 books. I've read several of them. They're all excellent, and I highly recommend all of you to read some of her books. And she's also the founder of the Research Foundation for Science, Technology, and Ecology, and Vandana, a national movement to protect the diversity and integrity of living resources. Vandanaji, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. And we call the people who've been through the Navdanya farm Bijaks, sowers of seed, and you are one of our favorite Bijaks.
Thank you so much. And I love the name of the farm. The name of the farm is Bija Vidyapith, which means you can correct me.
The school of the seed.
The school of the seed. Yeah. So that is of course the foundation of what we're going to talk about, and both of our works. So again, so happy to have you here. I know you're joining us here today, and we're having this conversation in this kind of I would say an emergency period, right? People all over the world are feeling like we're in this, where there's this pandemic, and we're being quarantined at home, and there's a lot of I'm sure people are feeling a lot of fear, a lot of worry, a lot of uncertainty about what's happening in the world right now. And I think just your view on these situations is so valuable, because you've seen people, you've seen cultures, you've seen communities in this kind of emergency state so many times, whether it's communities that are losing their land, having their water poisoned, having their forests cut down. How have you learned, being in contact with these communities so often, how have you learned to respond to these states of emergency? How have you learned to, I don't know, you seem so calm all the time, and I just want to know, and you're in these kind of difficult situations often, or meeting with people in these difficult situations often. How do you respond? How do you keep going?
Well, first, Rishi, I think the corona crisis is forcing humanity to shake the myth of certainty and predictability. My doctoral studies, my PhD was on the foundations of quantum theory, right, on uncertainty and non-separation. The entire mechanistic industrial ideal, which assumes total control, total prediction, and has got us in this mess.
Right.
Assumes separation, that we are not part of nature.
Right.
and we are masters. And therefore, when you're in that master mode, when things like this happen, when emergencies like this happen, you collapse, your system collapses, your worldview collapses. Whereas those of us who know uncertainty and non-separation is the way the world is woven, whether you learn it from quantum theory or you learn it from ecology, or you learn it from indigenous cultures, the two things you learn is nature bounces back. There's never an emergency which is a permanent emergency for nature. And therefore, all cultures and all worldviews that are embedded in the capacity of the earth to resurge also learn that power of resurgence, which is what resilience is all about. And that's why the poorest of people get flooded out of their homes in a cyclone. And the next year they're smiling and peaceful and never give up. All of those displaced peasants who are walking home or tried to walk home till they were told to go to quarantine, walking 800 miles, 500 miles, they were refugees from agriculture because of a very distorted model of farming that has privileged war chemicals. Actually, industrial agriculture is nothing else but a subsidy to the continuation of the war that started in Hitler's concentration camps. And in the process, we've destroyed the land, we've destroyed biodiversity, we've destroyed insects, butterflies, pollinators, and we've destroyed the farmers. So the farmers who became refugees and moved to the cities are now refugees from the city because of the corona crisis.
Right. And you're talking about, for those people listening who don't know, there's all these right, like you're saying, refugees from rural areas being in cities.
Yeah. Well, half of India is working in sectors that are very fragile. Right. And they are, in fact, the ones that are holding up the economy and society. And I know when this will pass, some of them will come back into cities, but a lot of them will do agriculture. My dream in 87 was, I will not let the Monsantos have monopoly over seed. They cannot pretend they invented the seed. They cannot pretend it's a machine that they put in place. This illusion is too much of an abuse against the creativity and creation of the earth. And now my commitment is all the people who've been termed refugees, wherever they're coming back to areas where we work, because India is so huge, we can't work everywhere. Right. I've already sent messages to my colleagues and partners, the farmers. I said, you are now teachers, like you, Rishi, are a teacher after you came and studied with us at Vandana. I said, you are teachers. Pass it on. So no farmer has to leave their land because they got into debt for chemicals. No farmer has to leave their land because they were forced to grow commodity crops for which they're getting nothing. The farmers in India are dumping loads of grapes and tomato, cash crops they were supposed to get rich on. Right. But these cash crops need a market. And when the market collapses, they're the most vulnerable. Whereas you will always need food. You will need food. Your family will need food. Your community will need food. So it's time now to, as I say, to return to the earth. Right. And to return to food as the foundation of an economy.
Yeah, I think this is something that I think everyone is starting to realize very clearly, that food is essential, and we're just, so much of the economy is built up around these kind of transient little widgets that come into our life and go, and they seem like they take up so much of our attention, and we're distracted from the things that are really fundamental. And food is one of those things that is so fundamental.
Absolutely. And for your listeners who are starting to realize how important food is and how important gardening is, I think it's extremely important to know that, there are powerful interests the ones I became familiar with because I saw the tragedies of agriculture. I didn't need to be looking at agriculture, working in it. I had a good enough world before the Punjab crisis and the Bhopal crisis, which is what threw me into looking at why is agriculture so violent. And I wrote the book, Violence of the Green Revolution. And since then, of course, at every step, anything new that happens in agriculture, I'm in the midst of it, I study it, I reflect on it. And I want to say there are two things. We shouldn't be complacent. We shouldn't assume that if you turn to your garden, everything will be fine. Because we have to garden the whole world. We have to save the whole world. Yeah? And that will happen only when we respect real food. Absolutely. Because we are made of real food. Our bodies get cancer when we eat toxics. The Roundup cases in America are making that so clear. And Monsanto just lost the case on labeling, where how much they abused me, I know. How much their trolls trolled me, because I used to always say that glyphosate and Roundup attacks the shikimate pathway, which is not just in plants, but in many of the microbes in our gut. They lied on their labels and said, only affects plants, is safe for humans. They've just had to pay $25 million for false labeling, and they're having to correct that false labeling. So we need real food. Toxics are harmful. And real food means we should be prepared for where big money wants to make more money. And this is an area where they don't want to grow food. They don't want gardens. They want ever bigger industrial farms sprayed with Roundup from drones, digital agriculture, more row crops of GMOs, and producing carbohydrates and proteins to be put together in a lab. And they want us to be brainwashed for the next phase, for fake food, just like they tried to brainwash us about fake fertilizer. Chemical fertilizers don't fertilize the soil, they kill soil organisms, as you know.
Yes.
So if for those who want to know more about this, you should read our two reports of Navdanya. One is called The Future of Our Daily Bread. The other is called The Future of Food, which is on fake food and the fake economics. And I would say two new ones, because the two big players we're going to face a lot is Bill Gates announced something called Ag 1. The whole world's agriculture should be the same. All of the world's agriculture. Your garden shouldn't have different plants. No, Rishi, you got it all wrong. You have diversity. That's wrong. Yeah. Uniformity on a planetary scale, even though with the coronavirus, we know it is monocultures and uniformities that have got us into the mess. First by invading forests, where the diseases invade us. And then monoculture farms or monoculture factory farms, which become hotbeds of disease.
Right.
So they want more of that disease. So look at Ag 1, the report. And another is, every once in a while I have to deal with the fact they use food safety laws to kill real food. And the latest in food safety is Alexa will teach us what good eating is in India. And so I'm saying, no, our grandmothers and not Alexa, because Amazon spread his wings too big and become the richest man in the world, bringing us junk. It's now time to allow the plants to lead the way.
I love that you just said that, because, for me, being in the garden, it is all about listening to the plants, listening to the soil, and I hear you say this all the time, that we've been treating the soil like it's dead. We've been treating the plants as they're dead. We've been treating the earth. You talk about, right, terra nullius versus terra viva. And so, I've been thinking a lot about, okay, if the soil we know is alive, the plants we know they're alive, what are they trying to tell us, and why are we not listening? So gardening is this wonderful way that we can get back into this relationship, and we can understand and see, like, oh, hey, these plants, they have an intelligence to them, and this soil has an intelligence to it. So, for me, beyond growing food, gardening just provides you with so much nourishment. And I would just love to hear from you, why is it that you think that gardening is important for people to start beyond the food? We know the food is a key part of it. What else is there in gardening? Because I hear you, gardens in schools, gardens at home. I hear you talking about gardens all the time. Why is it that we need to garden?
Well, I started the movement of Navdanya called Gardens of Hope when I watched the farmers growing BT cotton commit suicide, and their widows were left. And their widows had lost their land. They had nothing. And we didn't have the levels of money. So in the villages, the tiniest of huts has a little patch of land. And I said, let's grow gardens. So we gave them the seeds. So we started calling it Gardens of Hope. And then kids in the schools were committing suicide because the burden of artificial learning is so heavy for children. So our Gardens of Hope went into the schools. And you're right, the edible part of it as edible gardens is one element. When I talk to the children, places like Ranchi, and I said, so what was it at the end of the season? And they said the miracle of abundance. We've always been made to learn scarcity. Every discipline that's taught to us teaches us scarcity. And then we grew this tomato. And it gave us so many tomatoes we kept eating. And at the end of it, we saved a few for seed. And each of them had hundreds of seeds. And we have hundreds more for the next season. The garden taught us abundance. Absolutely. But most importantly, I do not know a person who does not find themselves in the garden. You're not doing the earth a favor when you garden. The earth is doing you a favor by saying, welcome back, child.
Absolutely.
You've gone astray. After all of the colonial industrial enterprise has been escape. The other day, an Italian journalist was interviewing me. And I said, it's crazy. Luckily, I studied physics. And I didn't study the rubbish that shapes our minds, written most of it in the 17th century and 18th century. And I think this bunch of people like Bacon and Hobbes and Locke, all of that rubbish should be composted. And we should grow a new thinking that comes from the garden.
Absolutely. This is something that, for me has been very influential, I might say, is that, or an idea that's kind of rooted in me deeply, is that in school, what I was taught was, or what we're taught is, we take this thing and we break it down into smaller and smaller pieces until we can understand these, we're looking at just this tiny bit, and we're not really sure what we're looking at, but we know a lot about it. And the difference between that and being in the garden, where I'm actually taking the plants and the soil and the insects and the fungi, and we're kind of weaving this whole together that is so much more than all the pieces. And gardening is really this place where we can see that the world works in cooperation, the world works in community, and that's just absolutely not what we're taught in schools. We're taught about competition, and we're taught about domination, and that's the world we inhabit.
Partly because those who had created what I call the various apartheids, the apartheid between us and nature, the apartheid between white people, a disease that's coming back so badly in the US, white superiority, and the assumed inferiority of anyone with a colored skin. Right. Of all the colors, we have reds and browns and blacks and yellows, and we should be celebrating diversity of color, of the skin too. But the conquerors just decided white is superior. They also decided man is superior to nature, and that's where the disease of anthropocentrism grows. And then along the way, because as I've written in my book, Staying Alive, on how the conquest of nature and the domination of women are deeply intertwined.
Mm.
You know, if I know my garden is whole, I don't go around tearing the plants down. I nourish them. It's a moral obligation. Yeah.
Yes.
But what I want to do is either exploit the wood for timber, or the medicine, or the grain, I have to divide. I don't just divide myself from the earth. I divide up elements of nature. And so you have basically genetic engineering is nothing more than genetic reductionism based on a very false assumption of genetic determinism, because even at the genetic level, there's indeterminism, just like there is in quantum theory. So what we inherited was a world of what I've called mechanistic reductionism, of divide, 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 divide. But as you experience, and as my disciplines of various kinds that I've gone through in my life now, beginning with quantum theory, has taught me, non-separation is the nature of reality. Relationship is where reality gets created. Relationship is where reality gets created in quantum theory, and relationship is where it gets created between you and the plants in your garden, and between the plants and the soil. And that relationship is what gets torn apart and ignored and ruptured when you have the idea of mechanistic reductionism. And what we are seeing with the rise of today's robber barons, they are today's robber barons, they've been called that, you know, the big tech, which basically violated everyone's creativity, pirated everything under the sun, and then put patents on what they had pirated. Big tech doesn't generate knowledge. They've got no idea what they're doing. It's just by chance that so far this machine they've created has run only because no one has had the ability to regulate it.
Right.
And no corona has hit it, because it'll have its own coronas. You know, you remember 2000, everything was supposed to collapse because computers wouldn't adjust to the digit 2000. They basically are taking that project that has got us in a mess, illusion of determinism and control, an illusion of data and information. But data and information is fragments, as you were saying. It's the fragments of the whole. Above information, you have knowledge. Above knowledge, you have wisdom. And without knowledge and wisdom, not only will we make more blunders and create more economic coronas, more biological coronas, more digital coronas, we will make a deep mess of our lives by deciding that 99% of humanity is not needed. And I've always said that those who get onto stages and say with artificial intelligence, 99% people won't be needed, they need to turn their backs to Mr. Zuckerberg and the rest, who come with this beautiful image of artificial intelligence. And they need to turn their face to the earth, because the earth never says 99% species are useless. She never says 99% humanity is useless. And the garden is where we all can belong.
Right.
The garden is going to be the savior in the time of artificial intelligence.
Well, I'm glad you said that too, because I think the garden is the place that we need to get back to. But and I wanna just focus in on one thing you said, which is, or something I've been noticing, is that this coronavirus, it's for many of us, it might feel like, you know, this society we've been in, these, you know, a lot of what we've known, a lot of what we've understood seems like it's coming to an end. And I think being in the garden, you know, has taught me that so much of what we were taught is that there's an end and there's a death, and death is an end. And being in the garden has shown me is that death is not an end. And death is actually, it's an opening, it's a creation of space, and it allows for this birth, and it's a feeding of birth, and it's a feeding of new ideas, it's a feeding of new emergences. So I hear so much of what you're saying is that these ideas, so many of these ideas that we've been holding are in decay, they're in decline. And I'd like to ask you, what do you see is in birth? What new is coming, or what old is becoming new again?
Well, a lot of what I've been saying, Rishi, is that actually the old wants to extend its life. And that's where the project of total control, the mechanistic control, the downloading of our mechanistic mind into computers and then saying they'll be smarter than us. No, a mechanistic mind can never be smarter than a synthesizing mind. Yeah. And so it's not the case that the old paradigm is dying. It is trying to consolidate itself with higher levels of exclusion, but others are changing the paradigm. So both things are happening at the same time, which is why quantum theory is so useful, because it lets you know that two parts can coexist.
Yeah.
So we have the continuation of the destructive linear trajectory of the mechanistic age, which brings us ruptures again and again, but because of the arrogance, they never treat the destruction they've caused as something they have caused. They treat it as an externality. That's why we have the idea of externality. And as our research in Navdanya and our book, Wealth Per Acre, shows, just in India, the externality of chemical farming, based on government data, we just consolidated the data and took UN systems of accounting, is $1.3 billion. No, yeah, $1.3 billion annually, just social and environmental destruction. So you keep creating a mess, but the line that you draw of your progress must carry on, And so there's that linearity is continuing till it'll bring total collapse, which is why we have to avoid it. And everything is showing that if we continue that linear path, then the collapse is for the human species is 100 years. I always say, the earth is too vibrant, the earth is too diverse. Something will replace the human species. There are too many other species to find their hubs. I mean, one of the things that's happened in Corona is more and more people. I had an interview the other day with Indian paper, because more and more mammals from the forest are walking around in cities. The other day there was a panther in Chandigarh. The poor monkeys don't have anything to eat, so they're trying to grab the onions in our garden here. Can you imagine poor monkeys having to uproot onions to eat? I mean, it just shows the imbalance we've created.
Yeah.
All this linearity of time and linear, that nothing dies, it's perpetual, growth is perpetual. All of these big tech guys are all hoping to never die. Poor men.
Yeah.
And they're all men, poor men. Whereas, as you said so clearly, I'm seeing the leaves behind you. They're not dead. They are future life of the soil. Every one of those leaves. It completed one part of its cycle of life. And that's why all cultures think of cycles and not linear, inevitable, certain projection. And in India, we call time Kali, and all our cosmology is around cycles, cycles that come and go. So not only do we as individuals have birth and death, every plant begins as a seed and goes back to seed, but it's just beginning the new life. But even civilizations dissolve. And I think what we are seeing is a dissolution, a dissolving of a non-sustainable system, with the masters of the universe so arrogant in their heads, they cannot see the dissolving, because for them, total control is what guides them, and total mastery. And that disease, they don't suffer. They make that poor farmer suffer. They make the migrant labor suffer. They make a woman with 3 children who doesn't have food on her table suffer. And the injustice and brutality of it is also part of this system. So yes, we shouldn't, the fear of death. I mean, both my parents so welcomed. I mean, they walked into that. They announced they're going.
Mm.
And now I'm leaving,
Mm.
And the most beautiful peace. And not a fear, oh my God, because what counts is how well have you lived your life.
Yeah.
If you've lived your life caring for others around you, including the plants, the day you have to depart from this particular life doesn't create panic at all. It's when you have lived your life with greed, wanting more, wanting absolute power, that you don't know how to face death, which is the beginning of a new life.
Mm. I think it's interesting, in English, we always talk about life and death like they're opposites, and once you're in the garden for just, once you make that first compost pile, you see that everything, you're putting all these dead things into the compost pile, and yet the compost pile is breathing, and you can see it breathing, and it's you can see the heat coming off it. It's very clearly alive, and you really begin to question this idea of, okay, is death the opposite of life, or is death a part of life?
It's a continuity of life. It's the next stage in a cycle of life. I think on everything, we've got to come back to cycles from linearity. Linearity is a curse. The earth works in cycles. When we compost, we're completing a cycle of fertility.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Whereas the synthetic fertilizer gave us the idea of linearity from fossil fuels to factories to our soil. Yeah. And linearity is a curse. Cycles is the way life works. And in cycles, one stage of the cycle is birth, and the other stage is death into the new birth.
And for those of us who are at home and we're wanting to start a garden now, so we can get back into this to start to feel these cycles, what are some of the, I don't know, what are some of the bits of wisdom that you can offer people who are watching here? What understandings should we have as we start a garden? And I know of course you talk so much about seed as well. Can you share some of your wisdom with us?
Yeah, so I call the beach Vidyapith the beach Vidyapith because the seed has been such an amazing teacher for me. So much of what I know about how life works has come from the seed. I decided to protect the seed because I did not accept it all being in the hands of a few people just for profit and monopoly. And for me, untruth is unbearable, absolutely unbearable. It is so painful that I could not accept the untruth of seed being patented. And so Navdanya has created community seed banks, which themselves are cycles of renewal. But a seed is there waiting to grow into not just a plant, because actually on all languages, you were a seed, all animals are seed. So the source, the beginning of life, the source of life is the seed. And the seed grows into seed in a cycle.
Yeah.
And the beauty is, because it creates abundance, as that little child who did a garden, understood, is, a Monsanto might have the idea of scarcity, a Terminator seed, which will not give seed. That's what the Terminator technology was about, creating sterile seeds. Even the hybrid is supposed to not give you true seed. It doesn't give you reliable seed, and therefore you must buy it every year. But real seed doesn't give you no seed. It gives you many seeds. And the fact, for me, the favorite family of crops, which we used to call forgotten foods, and now we call them foods of the future, are the millets. And the reason the millets are called millets is because they do 1 million seeds.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I mean, million as an approximate. I mean, compared
Yeah,
to
yeah,
a
yeah.
corn cob, a
Right.
millet had much, much more, much,
Right.
much, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not in the thousands, it's more than the thousands. So 1 million is the next easy number. And so the seed works in cycles. So when we had a big public hearing on the seed because farmers were committing suicide, farmers were selling kidneys because of the debt. And when I did this public hearing, it must have been in the year 2002, maybe, our poster was seed to seed, farmer to farmer.
Hmm.
Because the intention of what I call the poison cartel is the seed shouldn't go to seed. They should come to the market, to us every year. And farmers shouldn't exchange seeds. And for me, saving seeds and exchanging seeds is maintaining the continuity of cycles of life in farming, in nature, and in society. Because it's only through exchange. When I give you something, that gift weaves cycles, just like you talk about the garden and your relationship with plants. Without gifts, there will be no society. And I'm all for keeping physical distance in the period of an epidemic.
Right.
But I do not accept the fact that the physical distance was defined as social distance.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it's so wrong. And I think we all should be ready that, epidemics end, they pass. The plague went, the Spanish flu went. One day this will pass. Mm-hmm. And we should not accept separation between ourselves and separation from nature as the future inevitability. It will be imposed as a construct, and we should be ready in Gandhi's footsteps to say laws that go against justice, laws that go against democracy are not worthy of being obeyed. So when they tried to bring racist separation in Africa, South Africa, he started the Satyagraha, the first Satyagraha, against the salt laws. The Satyagraha, we took inspiration from the seed, that saving seed and exchanging seed is our highest dharma. And nothing can come in the way of this dharma. We will not let it. Now, our highest dharma is we will not be separated from each other. We might maintain physical distance while the epidemic is around, but we are going to come back and create communities of so much love and so much non-separation. No power, no brute on this planet can divide us.
I'm with you 100% on that. After this, I think we do need, this is the time for us to come together. This is the time for us to be in that relationship with each other, with our gardens. And I think this is the message you're offering is exactly what we all need to hear. And I want to now take some time and see if we can ask some of the questions from the audience, if that's all right with you.
5 minutes. I'll stay.
5 minutes. Okay. Let me try to. There's so many that have come in here. I'm just trying to find one that we can answer in 5 minutes, in a couple of minutes here. Okay, how this is an interesting one. I'm a postgraduate and aware of ecosystems around me due to my family background as farmers. How do we make multinational corporation employees aware about the importance of ecosystems? Why are people still in denial?
Yeah, you don't begin by changing other people's minds. You begin by changing your mind and doing the right thing. And as Thomas Kuhn said it so clearly, changes of paradigms never come because you've convinced the holders of old paradigms to give up their paradigm. Paradigms don't ever given up. They just become irrelevant. They become irrelevant.
So we need to do that work to build up these new paradigms.
Absolutely. Yeah. So wherever you are, with the community where you are, who's willing to grow an ecosystem understanding, spend your time with them.
Mhm. Absolutely. And let's see another one. I'd love to hear Vandana's interpretation of regeneration and the importance of shifting our consciousness towards that multiplicity, abundance, etc.
Yeah, the first element of regeneration is to know that we are not in an extractive linear system. You know, that has been the problem since colonialism, since the fossil age, the industrial age, and is on really fast forward to a dead end. So regeneration means realizing that life works in cycle, and that regeneration means the soil can be regenerated, can be treated badly, but we can regenerate it with care. That seeds can be regenerated, landscapes can be regenerated, our health can be regenerated. Brilliant work that, you know, it takes a week of eating good food and organic food to remove the desertification of our microbe in the gut. That in a week, good microbes come right back, just like in a season, the soil microbes come back with good composting.
Yeah.
So I would add regeneration of community and the commons. You know, because I think the big assault in this phase of Corona, part of it is the necessary physical separation. The other part is the unnecessary propaganda on fear of each other.
Yeah.
And that fear of each other should not be allowed to get ground. And therefore, community and knowing, prepare, depend. We don't know when this process will end, the lockdown will end. But let's use this time to say, what is it that's important as a commons in society? We definitely know the soil and the earth is. We know the seed is, that's what Navdanya has done. And for those who want to go to the website of Navdanya, you can also see my piece, a blog I did on ecological reflections on the Corona pandemic, on how, yeah, it's a, and for the courses, you know, of the kind that you came and attended, we offer, we don't know if in September they'll have lifted the lockdown, but if they have, we have the A to Z. But what are the commons? We everywhere, the neoliberal model was dismantle healthcare, let people buy health, and if they don't have money to buy, let them die. The coronavirus has shown how important public health is as a commons. What are the other commons? I personally feel, you know, I would love to dig up all big parking lots in front of all the Walmarts and the Amazon stores and have all the people working inside the stores come out and make gardens. Yeah, it would be so beautiful. So instead of being slaves in an exploitative system, to be celebrators of regeneration. So community is going to be vital.
I think that'll lead me into the last question I found here, which is, you know, we're hearing a lot now, especially in the US, about regenerative agriculture and the promise of regenerative agriculture in relation to climate change, also in relation to economics. And the message so far has been, buy these products of buy these products from regenerative farmers, buy these products from regenerative farms, and support soil regeneration, support ecosystem regeneration in that way through your purchases. Is there a deeper role for us to play, as you know, for people who don't live on farms? Is there a deeper role for us to play in this movement towards regeneration beyond our purchases? And what is that role?
Well, I think, you know, we need to be aware of why the word regeneration was created. At that point, the biotech industry, which was getting very angry with labeling initiatives and wanted no one to know, and organic was the big alternative. So they assaulted organic. And of course, organic had been co-opted by big industry. So a lot of people were anyway not so happy. So regeneration was the word that, I was part of the founding of the regeneration movement with Andre Lowe and Hans Herren and Ronnie Cummins. And from there grew all of these systems of new certification, etc. But I think the issue is the worldview, a worldview of regeneration with our role in regeneration, and a worldview of conquest and war. Because like I say, industrial agriculture came from Hitler's labs. It continues a worldview where at war with insects. I mean, the idea that a little virus needs the whole world to declare war on the virus, it won't work, because every war against microbes, humans have lost.
Yeah.
We've never won against a microbe. They turn out to be just so much smarter. And so I would say regeneration as a philosophy, but we must avoid a problem that I have been trying to deal with from when I entered the agriculture scene. I watch too many people spend all their time on semantics. Oh, biodynamic is superior to permaculture, is superior to organic, is superior to natural, is superior to this. And I think we need to look at the principles. How do you deal with nature? What are your principles of renewal? What are your principles of regeneration? That's what counts. And that's why I love the fact that in India, we never picked one word. Every one of our really beautiful poetic texts are about 100 names and 1,000 names. No? The 100 names of the Ganga, the 1,000 names of the Devi. Nothing has one name. And let's stop semantics and realize that just like we are people with different colors, good systems with the same principles of ecological stability, sustainability, and gratitude have different names. Let's not fight over names. Let's cooperate on the common practice. That is what the earth is inviting us to do. As you said, in the garden, plants are diverse, but they're not in competition, they're in cooperation. Okay. The future is in cooperation, where the tiniest of herbs is waiting to nourish the biggest of trees. And in the garden, the idea that big is superior just dissolves. Because it's usually that little leaf that is the future of the tree. So good luck, Rishi. Take care of yourselves.
Thank
to
you,
all the people on the webinar, good night from India. All of us take care of ourselves and come out more resilient. Come out stronger in community, come out more hopeful. Don't let this virus of fear ever infect you. With my love, thank you.
Thank you, Vandana. What a wonderful message for all of us, and you have a great night.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining. Okay, so you guys have submitted so many questions. Thank you all for coming on here and watching our webinar. If you do have any questions for me in particular, feel free to submit them right now. I'm available to stay on for a couple minutes here. So let's take a look. Okay, do you believe we should dedicate parts of our gardens to rewilding, i.e. taking out non-natives and encouraging the plants that belong to that soil environment to begin with, encouraging wildlife both in plants and animals to your garden design? That's an interesting question. Yeah, this idea of wild is kind of interesting to me, as in, what is wild? What's your definition of wild? A lot of times wild means what we're trying to say is it's this part of nature that doesn't include humans, and that is wild. So I just, as a first step, I guess I would ask you to think about that phrasing that you're putting out. You know, in terms of native plants and non-native plants, again, there's this kind of I guess what I'll say about that is plants that have been on your land for generations, for hundreds of years or thousands of years. Of course, those plants are going to have relationships with the insects and with the soil and the microbes in the soil that have and those relationships have existed for that long period of time. And so those plants are going to be very important to that land that you're in. At the same time, you know, plants have been introduced all over the world for the past hundreds of years. And now those plants have also come into a relationship with the land that they're in, with the insects that they live around, with the microbes that they live around. And of course, all these, you know, there's been this huge exchange of microbes and plants and seeds and fungi and birds, and, you know, it's all been rapidly mixed up. So I think this idea, I do think there is some validity to this idea of restoring native plants, and that's something that I'm doing in my garden as well. But whether we need to clear out and eliminate the non-native plants and only have the native plants, I'm not so sure about that idea. So my garden, we have, you know, there's California poppies planted here, which are natives. We have native plants planted underneath our fruit trees, and our fruit trees come from all around the world. So that's just my, you know, how I personally take it. And I think it's all about an exploration. I do agree that we should replant the plants that have existed here and create that space for them, bring them back into our lives again, because a lot of them have been forgotten or suppressed, just like so many different things in our lives. Okay, what are some of the easy plants to grow in a city at home? I started with some potatoes, onions, got tiny baby potatoes. Geez, would like to try to start some bigger journey towards growing more. Okay, so if you're at home and you just have a patio or a balcony, the easiest thing to get started with is definitely like some of the leafy greens. You can do things like cilantro, you can do things like lettuces, you can do oregano and thyme and basil. If this person's who's asking the question is from India, you can very easy to grow tulsi in a pot at home. So a lot of the leafy green herbs, they have that dense nutrition, you know, that the herbs have a strong flavor because they have dense nutrition. So in a small space, you can get that deep nutrition from those leafy green plants. So try to grow the things that have that super strong flavor, because if you're not able to grow a lot of it, you can at least chop that up and put it into all of your food and get some of that really good nutrition. Of course, the important thing when you're starting to garden is that the plants don't, you know, they don't grow by themselves. They grow in relationship with the community in the soil that the plant is growing in. So whatever you're growing, you have to be thinking about the soil. You have to be thinking about the water that you're feeding to the plant. So make sure that you understand, you know, try to get some understanding about soil health, and water, how to provide water to the plants. So for those of you who didn't hear the earlier announcement, we are at Kiss the Ground about to launch a mini regenerative gardening course for all of you who are at home during this quarantine period and wanting to get started gardening. The course is going to start April 15th, and you can sign up for the wait list at kisstheground.com. Someone just suggested Brad Lancaster has great books about water harvesting. I agree 100%. So if you are wanting to learn about water harvesting, check out those books. Where will the recording for this be able to be available? It'll be available on the Kiss the Ground website, same place where you signed up for this webinar. What is the area of your garden? So I talked a little bit about this earlier, but I can repeat. I'm in Los Angeles. I'm actually in the side yard of our garden here, and we have over 80 fruit trees growing on a pretty small property. And we grow lots of vegetables. We grow lots of fruit. We keep chickens for eggs. And if you actually just give me a second, I will show you the soil right behind me so you can get an idea of what really healthy soil looks like. So let's take a look here. This is some of that healthy soil. And you can see that that deep, rich color like a super dark chocolate. And there's all sorts of roots and insects and worms. And if you smell healthy soil, it's got this very rich fungus. You know, it smells of like deep mushrooms. And actually, we just harvested some mushrooms from one of our other gardens. We harvested some morel mushrooms because there are mycelium in the soil, and with mycelium fruit, that's what gives us a mushroom. So just a little preview, and I got a bunch of soil all over my laptop. More information about the course would be good. Yeah, so the course is going to be 3 weeks long. There's going to be, in that 3 weeks, there's going to be 6 sessions. We're going to have 3 live in-person sessions here on Zoom, and then we're going to have 3 recorded sessions. In those 3 weeks, I'm going to really focus. This course is a shorter version of a course that I've taught with Kiss the Ground before. It's usually 7 weeks long. But this is going to be a condensed version. I'm going to be really focused on getting you started gardening as quickly as possible. So, you know, for those of us who are not able to leave our houses, I think it's really important that we can start to get some food growing. So we're going to be really focused on getting food growing quickly. So we're going to just kind of like laser focus in on getting the soil to a condition that we can start planting in, getting our water set up. We're going to talk about seeds and vegetables and what we can plants that grow quickly. We're going to talk a bit about composting as well, because that's an important part of gardening. We're going to be talking about growing in ground, if you have ground space in soil, how to get that set up. We're also going to be talking about, because there's going to be many of you joining who are living in apartments or condos or flats. So we're also going to be focusing on getting potted gardens started. So how can we grow food in any location and growing nutritious food out of healthy, living, vibrant soil? Okay. How do you define regenerative agriculture in a succinct way? Your 1-sentence description. That's also a great question. Instead of defining regenerative agriculture, what I'm going to do is try to define regeneration. And my simple 1-sentence definition of regeneration is treating everything in the world as though it's living because it is. And so regenerative agriculture is how you would treat soil as though it's living. because soil is living. How would you treat a tree if you knew it was living? Well, you would treat that tree with care, you would treat that tree with respect. You would know that the tree needs to be fed, you would know that the tree needs to be watered. And I know that sounds really simple and almost obvious, but you'd be surprised, how many times I go out to gardens and people are planting seeds into soil and then putting some water on it, and the soil has not been fed, the soil has not been covered, the soil has not been cared for. So we're not treating the world around us as though it's living, we're treating the world like it's dead. And so regeneration is all about treating the world as a living being, and understanding that all living beings have wisdom, all living beings have needs, and we can listen and we can understand, and then we can, as what does a gardener do? A gardener is someone who listens to the needs of the beings in the garden and tries to facilitate those needs being met. That's what a regenerative gardener is. And that's basically what all of my courses are about. How do we listen? How do we see? And how do we respond? Okay, so it's just getting past 10 o'clock. I'm just going to answer one last question, and then I think we're going to call it a day here. There's another question about the recording for the webinar. So again, it'll be up on kisstheground.com. And let me see here. Oh, I'm just getting a bunch of comments. Okay, so I think that's it, guys. Thank you so much for joining. I hope you enjoy the interview. Vandana is also always someone who's able to link so many different things together for us. She has such a broad view, and she's been a great mentor of mine. So thank you for joining me for the conversation. So many of you, I'm still kind of shocked. And I'll see you again. We're going to be doing another one of these next week. We'll have the guest announced soon. And yeah, have a great week. Get out in the garden if you can. Get your hands in the soil. And look forward to seeing you all again, possibly in my regenerative gardening class.